Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. And it is great to be part of women organized and led things. I hope that you'll allow me to invade your space a little bit. I was telling someone that I met just last night at the reception, I really love working with women as a coach because women just tend to start off with an openness to want to learn and grow. They just are more emotionally self-aware, and if you go back to the old adage of men will never stop and ask for directions, that's a little bit what it's like when I coach men from time to time. It's like but women are really open, want to learn, want to grow, and so I'm thrilled to be a part of this, and I'm thrilled to be in a space with a whole bunch of entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurs. You guys are crazy. And you have to be. You have to be, and as Anita talked about, you have to have that passion, right? And I especially love being in a space, and I love working with entrepreneurs that are in the food and beverage space, because I do think that food is the universal language, and I do think that in the recent episode of The Bear, Thomas Keller said, what we do is we nurture people. And I think that's what food does, is it nurtures. And we get to be part of people's finest, best, most exciting, most celebratory moments, right? So thrilled to be in this space with you and to talk a little bit this morning with you about leadership, because that's kind of an interesting thing that happens is you kind of start your business and you're very passionate about, you have an idea. Anita talked about doing her dinner parties, right? And you can all kind of trace back to when you had, you got bit by the bug and you wanted to do the thing and you got it started, and you were all in, and you all are in a space where you've built businesses and you're down the road now, and somewhere along the line you realize, oh, it takes more than cooking and serving, and I have to lead. And not a lot of time or thought went into, when you put your business plan together, you weren't thinking about, okay, what's my leadership going to look like in year 1, and what's my leadership going to look like in year 2, and what's my leadership going to look like in year 5, right? And so I really want to talk to you this morning some about what I call the shift from an entrepreneurial leadership mindset to an executive leadership mindset. And so that's what we want. That's the space that we're going to kind of swim in a little bit this morning. Before I jump into some of the things that I want to talk about, I want to activate your thinking around this. And so we're going to do a little bit of a collaborative exercise. So I want you to just take a minute real quick, and I want you to think about one story or an example from the past month that illustrates a strength of your current leadership skills. So something that happened in the last month or so and that you handled well, and it represents a strength in your leadership. So just capture that for a minute, maybe write it down. I'm seeing some grimaces. Hopefully there was something you did well as a leader in the last month. All right, well, maybe the second one might be a little bit easier. Think about one story or example from the past month that illustrates a challenge of your current leadership skills. Okay, and now I want you to pair up with a partner and share that. So let's just take about 5 minutes and share what's something in the last month that happened that represented a strength in your leadership, and what was something that happened in the last month that represents maybe a bit of a challenge in your current leadership skills. Let's just take about 5 minutes. Go ahead and turn to one another. Wow. I wanted to eavesdrop in on some of that. Let's just throw out a few strengths. What are some of the strengths that you identified in your leadership in the last month? Just call them out. Only something said by a woman. Thank you. What else? Strengths.
Being comfortable communicating abstract concepts in a way that's like useful for a team.
Yeah. Awesome. Inspiration, creativity, yeah.
Being able to hold like two opposing truths at the same time.
Yeah. Paradox. Love it. Cutting your losses. Okay. Yeah. What?
Healthy balance.
Good.
Getting out of your own way.
Getting out of your own way. All right. How about a couple challenges? Saying no. Yes. What's that?
Developing more leaders.
Developing leaders.
Having trouble distinguishing between professional relationships and friendships at work.
Yes. We're going to talk about that. Thank you. Leaning into difficult conversations. And actually, what we need to figure out is how to have those conversations, right? Not just leaning into them. I think one of the reasons we don't lean into them is because we're not sure how to have them. Anything else?
Overcoming age discrimination on either side of the...
Yeah. All right, well, let's jump in. I want to just give you an overview. We're going to kind of hustle through a lot of this, just to give you kind of a sense of what does it look like when we begin to shift our leadership mindset from an entrepreneur to an executive. And you might say, well, I don't want to be an executive. Well, if you've been in business for a number of years, then you need to be an executive. And it may not be. I have some clients that are wanting to build their businesses. And so the reason they want to move in that executive mindset is because they want to grow their businesses, expand their business. I have a couple clients who are completely thrilled with what they have right now. They just want it to be peaceful. They want to have work-life balance. They want to be able to go away. And so whatever the reason is that you want to move into that executive mindset, it's really not an option. It is something that you have to do at some point in time in the growth of your business. So I first want to look at entrepreneurial leadership, okay? What is it? What are some of the leadership skills that go with the entrepreneurial leadership mindset? What is that mindset? And then what are some of the challenges? So let's start out first with leadership skills. Passion. It came up, Anita mentioned it. There's hands down, entrepreneurs have passion. The only reason why you would do the crazy things that you do and mortgage your homes and put yourself out with, the risk that you have to take is because you have an incredible passion for something, right? Vision. You can see something that doesn't exist. You remember when you first did that? You know how fun that is? I remember, this isn't business-wise, although I've started a number of businesses, but my wife and I were in San Diego, and we were wanting to buy a house, and I wanted a really nice kitchen in the house that we were going to buy, and unfortunately, I couldn't afford any of the houses that had the kitchens that I wanted, because I didn't need everything else that went with it. So I remember us sitting down, and we were in San Diego, and you know how they say it only rains like 5 days a year. In San Diego, we got all 5 of them on this one trip. So we were in a Barnes & Noble, and we pulled out some paper, and we began to map out what we wanted our house to look like, and we ended up building it. And I often kid that I built a kitchen with 4 bedrooms, because it's this like massive kitchen. But it's that ability to see something that doesn't exist, right? To begin to see it. So vision, creativity, the ability to create things, to, again, to like use, I loved hearing what Anita was saying about, taking the things that are local and using the ingredients that, yeah, anybody can take a Wagyu steak and whatever, but when you are like really being creative about what you're doing, you're not just the food, the space, the service, and all of that. So entrepreneurs have lots of creativity. Agility, this is a huge thing that entrepreneurs have. You have to be able to shift so quickly from one thing to another. And it's an amazing gift. And you could never start your business, if you weren't able to shift into and do all kinds of different things. Risk tolerance, right? Entrepreneurs have an ability to take risks, to believe that it's going to happen and that it's going to be okay. Inspiration. Entrepreneurs are great at, you remember when you were first starting and how you had to, who did you con to work with you? Inspiration. That's the gift that you use. That's the strength that you used. So I want to just bring this chart up here real quick. This is an assessment that I take all my clients through, both as the leaders, but also the teams. And around the outside of this circle, you'll notice 12 words, and those words are 12 leadership strengths. And then you'll notice in the four corners that there are 4 words: connection, impact, structure, and clarity. Those are the 4 natural styles, leadership styles that people have. Now, when it comes to entrepreneurs, most entrepreneurs, and so let me stop and say, most of us are going to start off with 6 of those leadership skills that we're pretty good at and 6 that we struggle with. Most entrepreneurs have those 3 at the top, right? The idea-driven way of thinking. They're open, they're inspirational, they're creative, they're inventors, visionaries, ideators, right? They have that space. Those are what we were just talking about with passion and all of that stuff. So most entrepreneurs either are impact or connection tilts because they're really good at that idea space. And we're going to come back to, if that's what they're really good at, what might be some of the areas that they struggle with, right? So notice all that: passion, vision, creativity, agility, risk, tolerance, inspiration, all comes from that top area and those leadership strengths. Resourceful. Entrepreneurs are incredibly resourceful. I mean, they are the MacGyvers of business, right? Because you've got to be incredibly resourceful. Problem solving. This is something that entrepreneurs are really good at. You are great at solving problems. And you do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? You get texts, you get calls. What are we going to do about this? And, about ready to start service, the air conditioner goes out. I mean, like, something doesn't show up. You are great problem solvers. Determination. Entrepreneurs have an incredible amount of determination. They put their heads down and they just keep moving forward. Staff management, and I want to delineate this because this is a little bit different than what we're going to talk about and going forward. But good at kind of managing in the weeds the day-to-day, right? And this is one of the things we were talking about, the professional culture versus the family culture. Entrepreneurs are great at creating that family culture. And it's really useful in the early years because it does feel like a family and everybody is kind of pulling together and working together. So these are some of the leadership skills that entrepreneurs have, and I would guess that as you look through that list, most all of you in this room have most of those skills. And brand development. Let's add that one there too. We'll come back to that. So what's the mindset of an entrepreneur? Well, among all things, tactical urgency is the mindset of the entrepreneur. So we're going to use this. I'm going to use this word a lot because this is really important. Tactical urgency. Everything is immediate. It's now. It's tactical. We've got to get it done. We've got to figure it out. We have to get we got to get service out tonight. We've got to, whatever it is that has to be done. Leading by example. So what I call this sergeant leadership. So these entrepreneurs are really good at they eat with the troops, they sleep with the troops, they're up before the troops are up, they go to bed after the troops go to bed, right? They lead by example. They'll work harder than anybody else in their organization. And they kind of feel like if I do that, then my people will kind of reflect what I do. And there's some truth to that. And hands-on control. Entrepreneurs are really good at and have this mindset of, I've got to maintain, I have to have my hands on it. If I don't have my hands on it, and my clients will tell me all the time, you know, when we first start working together, it's like, well, I tried to like take a day off and let them do it, and you know, and I walked in, and then the lights were too bright, and the chairs weren't in the right place, and the music was too loud, and so it's making their case that I have to have hands-on control. It's the only way that it works. All right, so what's the challenges of this kind of leadership? Work-life balance. I won't even begin to ask on a scale from 1 to 10, what does that look like? Boundaries. How to set boundaries. Accountability and firing. This is probably the top thing that my clients will tell me is, I suck at firing. It's a hard thing to do. It's a necessary thing to do. And it's a very difficult thing to do in an entrepreneurial mindset. Micromanagement. When you have that hands-on control, that's what you're doing, is you're having to micromanage. And if some of you that have been in business for a while, and if you're struggling with some of these things, what you'll notice is, like, you can tell that your people are getting somewhat resistant. It's like you're always in their space, and you feel like you always have to be in their space because they're not really getting it done the way you want it to get done, and yet there's this tension that goes back and forth. Burnout. And you know what? Burnout isn't if things aren't going well only. I have some clients whose businesses are going phenomenally well, and they're burnt out. So in some cases, that's even worse, because you're like, wow, this is working really well. I should be thrilled and excited. Why am I burnt out? Loss of passion. And boy, that's really sad when I see that happen. When I see restaurant owners who just have kind of lost the passion because they're so in the weeds that they forgot why they're doing what they're doing and what inspired them to begin with. Lack of clarity and measurements. And we're going to come back to measurements because that is such an important piece. This is a really big thing, subjective decisions. So when you're in the entrepreneurial mindset, almost every decision is somewhat subjective. It's squishy. How often do you feel like your decisions are kind of squishy? It's like, that's what keeps you kind of stuck. It's like, I know I think I should do this, but what if it's not? And it's that back and forth thing. Like, wouldn't it be wonderful to get out of that subjective space into an objective space where you're able to just move forward without the angst and the agony and the thinking it over and over and over again? This is what happens when we're needing to maybe let somebody go. And second guessing, which comes with subjective decisions. And feeling guilty for stepping back. This is a big thing with the entrepreneurial mindset. When you're in the entrepreneurial mindset, you start to, I can't tell you how often I talk to my clients, and as they're growing in their leadership and they start stepping back, they feel guilty because they're used to that sergeant leadership. Well, but I always opened the play, and I always closed, and I was always there. And what are people going to think? And I like to jokingly say, they're not working because you do those things. They're working because you and they agreed on a paycheck and a job description. And you're giving them what you agreed to. All right, so let's look at the shift to what does it look like to start being in that executive mindset space. So I want to talk about the tools and the strategies. I want to talk about the mindset and then the benefits. So, structure and processes. And there's a couple of challenges with structure and process. And I'm not saying, like, you know, entrepreneurs are pretty good at, like, menu structure or the line or like some of those things. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the way the organization is led and who's responsible for what and what authority do they have and all of those kinds of things. And there's a couple problems with structures and processes. Most entrepreneurs, because you're at the top of the chart, you're idea people, you're not structure process people. And the second challenge is that takes time. And who's got extra time for that? So you don't really like doing it, and it's going to take time. But it's your only way out of the weeds. So structure and processes, roles and system clarity. I can't tell you how often we do like job description audits, and everybody's got job descriptions. I mean, you're supposed to have job descriptions, so you have job descriptions, right? And but I can't tell you how often you go back to a job description, and half of the things on that job description, the person that has that job description is not doing. And there's another 10 things that aren't on that job description they are doing. And this is what makes it difficult when it comes time to like either giving people raises or firing or any of those kinds of things, is it's so subjective because it's like, well, you don't have something that's really clear. You haven't said, these are the 6 things you're doing, and these are how we're going to measure the success of those things. And oh, by the way, every couple of months, every 3 months, 4 months, we're going to take a look at it because businesses are always evolving, and so people end up taking on other things, and then you feel bad. It's like, well, they're not doing this thing I asked them to do, but they are doing these things, and I didn't ask them to do it, and so then you're back in that subjective space again. So roles and systems clarity, measurement mechanisms, again, so important. You can't just create structures and processes and roles. You have to have measurement mechanism. You have to know, how are you measuring the success of that thing that you've asked them to do? And it has to be clear to you, and it has to be clear to them. I often say that nobody should be surprised when they get fired, because it should be so clear what their role is and what the expectations are and what the measurements are, that it's a no-brainer that, yeah, this isn't working. So again, I want to go back to the chart here. So notice at the bottom is that perspective, focus, diligence. That's where the structure and clarity lies, right? And most, again, entrepreneurs, not all, but most entrepreneurs are up there in the connection and the impact space. They're really good at that, at the ideas. And what ends up happening, I have a client, she makes me laugh because we are always talking about how to get into this kind of strategic space mindset and stuff. And she always says, like, she'll have 2 or 3 of the things that she needs to be doing that are, that are down at the bottom of the chart. And she says, I just always get dragged into the weeds. But in some ways she wants to, because she's good there. She's good at that immediate problem solving. And it also has a lot of gratification to solve that problem immediately, right? So the interesting thing is that a lot of the people on your team, they're down in that clarity and structure space. And so they actually want more of that. I have a client who, when I first started working with her, she's an impact tilt, and all of her entire team were clarity tilts. And so that has a lot to do with how quickly people move and how long it takes for them to process and the kind of direction that they need. And so this is one of the things that we work on, is helping the team understand what their natural bends are and how to better work together. But I just wanted to show you this simply to say, it's no wonder that we struggle with that piece as entrepreneurs, because it's just not, it's not the thing that helps you launch. Like, people that are down at the bottom, they're not launching new things. They have a very low risk tolerance. You have some of on your team, they seem like pessimists. You bring out a new idea and they're like, that'll never work. And half the time they're right. That'll never work, right? But it's kind of that constant fight between, you want to do something new and they don't want to change anything, and so it's about finding the balance. All right, so measurement mechanisms, empowerment. See, what begins to happen when you shift from entrepreneur mindset to an executive mindset is you begin to empower your team. Objective decisions. I can't tell you how much more sleep you would get if you could shift your decision-making processes and matrix from a subjective to an objective. Like, here it is. This isn't personal. This isn't, I don't have to think about this. It was clear what was expected. The measurements were clear. We've had great conversations about this. And now this is what needs to happen. The amount of additional sleep and the less stress you would have by being able to move into that space. Remember we said staff management under entrepreneur mindset? Staff development. And somebody mentioned that here this morning. Like, how do you develop your people? And I'm not talking about, like, you all are, you're experts. Like, we're not talking about the hard skills here this morning, and that's the big difference, right? You know how to cook, and you know what hospitality looks like, and you know inventory, all those things, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about the soft skills. We're talking about emotional intelligence. We're talking about working together. We're talking about leadership. We're talking about accountability, right? So how do you shift from managing your staff to developing your staff? Because more than ever, and it's wonderful to hear Anita say how she's had people for such a long time, and I'm sure half of you out there are like, that's not my case, but we do want to keep the people that we have when they're good, and we want to help develop them. Professional culture. So how do we move from a family culture to a professional culture? That doesn't mean you have to lose the interpersonal. You don't have to lose it, but it can't be. That's one of the reasons that firing becomes really difficult. It's like, how do you fire your family, right? Brand management. So in entrepreneurial, you're developing your brand, but now you're managing it. How do you manage it? How do you help your team understand exactly what that brand is, and they own it like you own it, so that the lights are at the right level, and the sound is at the right level, and the chairs are in the right place, and everything is the way you want it to be. Clear communication. And this is such a big piece of the puzzle is, are we really clear? And I can tell you the clients that I work with, they don't start out they think they're being clear. And then how often have you told somebody something, you had a difficult meeting, you thought you were clear, and then a week or two later, you weren't even on the same page. You don't have time for that, right? So you've got to get really good at having very clear communication. One of the ways that you do that is you follow up every meeting you do, you follow up with an email or something written. And then you ask whoever it is that you've met with to review it and make sure that they heard the same thing that you heard. So now you have an actual copy of something, right? And you are double checking to make sure that everybody's on the same page. That's one of the things you can do with that. Time management. I often have my clients do a time audit just to see, in a 2-week span of time, what are you doing? And not a single one of them don't walk away completely surprised at how much time they are wasting in those tactical urgency places. How do you get better at time management? And task discipline. So what I mean by this is, another thing that I do with clients as they're moving into the space is I ask them to kind of re-envision their role. That is so hard for them because their role was the hub of everything, right? But now as you're stepping back and you're more of an executive leader, what is your role? And what I mean by task discipline is you do what your role is, just like you expect others to do the role that you've given them. Okay, so what shifts in our mindset? So from tactical urgency, we move to strategic importance. If you did a time audit, not all of you, but I think I would guess that many of you, most of you, you'd find out that 90% of what you're doing is in the tactical urgency space, not in the strategic important space. So I want to just show you a quick chart here. Stephen Covey, famous business person, put this together years ago, and I use this with my clients a lot. Notice there are 4 quadrants, and notice the intersection. So in the top left-hand quadrant, this is where most of you are spending most of your time. It's important things and urgent things. It's the quadrant of necessity. That's where most of you are spending most of your time. Hopefully, nobody is spending much time in quadrant 4, which is not important and not urgent. That's when you just go escape and go, do something, whatever. So, but that's not usually an issue. Then we have quadrant 3. It's not important, but it's urgent. And what happens with this is your people are going to think it's important. It's not important, and they're going to be very urgent about it. Everything that your staff brings to you is urgent. It's just urgent. Everything is urgent, right? And so you have to start learning to reject things that aren't important in terms of the way you manage your time, even if they seem urgent to other people. And the quadrant that we're spending very little time in, that is critical, is quadrant 2. It's important, but it's not urgent. And that takes incredible amounts of discipline to spend time there in the strategic spaces, thinking forward, thinking ahead, really thinking strategically about the next steps, not being caught up in the tactical urgency. So tactical urgency moves to strategic importance. Lead by example moves to lead by coaching and mentoring. And it's a really big difference, because the lead by example is in that micromanagement space, but leading by coaching and mentoring is a completely different space. And then hands-on control moves to accountability focus. And we're just not good at accountability. And we've got to get better at accountability. All right, what are the benefits? Renewed passion. I could easily stand up a dozen of my clients, and they will tell you that since they started making this shift, they're really in that space of renewed passion. Like, they remembered why they're doing what they're doing. They have the vision. They can see it again. And they're able to find that way forward. Space to innovate. When was the last time you really had an opportunity to innovate? Really think about what's going on and not just churn through what you're doing. Healthy boundaries and self-care. And I understand when you start businesses in the beginning, there is no healthy boundaries. There is no self-care. I mean, you're all in. You have to be. That's the thing that entrepreneurs are willing to do. They're willing to be all in. They're willing to go 24/7. And that's great. And you have to do that. And if you're not willing to do that, unless you've got some somebody or other who can just pile tons of money into it, and you can hire, amazing staff or whatever from the beginning, that's not typically it. We're all in, right? But at some point in time, you can't keep running at that pace. I often say to entrepreneurs, the whole point of this thing is to, not just to make some money, obviously it would make some money, but to have some flexibility and freedom. That's the point. The point is to be able to choose what you want to do. And that looks like something different for everybody. It might be, again, that, I've got a client now that is, got a particular concept exactly where she wants it to be, and now she can think about what she wants to do next. So it could be that could be for her healthy boundaries or doing something different, or it could be I only have to be in my business 1 week a month, and I'm doing other things the rest of the month. Team ownership. How do you get your team to own it at the same? It'll never be the same, but a very close place to the way you own it. And that's what happens under entrepreneurial or executive leadership. Decision-making ease. I promise you, when you start shifting your mindset to an executive, making decisions are going to be a lot easier. Choice over your time and your role. You get to choose. Where do you want to invest your time? What do you want your role to be? And I know that some of you are out there thinking, there's no way. I mean, I have to be doing what I have to be doing. There is a way. And it doesn't matter how big, how small, how many businesses you have. Ability to envision the future. So, I wanted to save a little bit of time for some Q&A. And I'm wondering what questions you have as you think about this shift. Yeah, what questions do you have? Or thoughts or comments, just something you might want to share. Yes?
So a lot of us have partners. What if one of us, and what your advice would be, if one of us is already shifting into the executive and the other one wants to stay? And it is hard to...
Love that question. Thank you for bringing it up. And I meant to mention it. I work with a lot of clients who do have partners. And so one of the things that you have to do is you have to negotiate between the two of you. There has to be, we talk about partnership agreements in terms of like the business side, but not necessarily on the practical side of things. So it really does come down to a negotiation between the two to really sit down and say, this is what I want, this is what you want. How do we work together in a way that serves both of our needs? It's got to be some really honest conversations, right? And the partner that maybe wants to be more involved is going to think that the partner that wants to step away is kind of abandoning the business, but it's not necessarily the case. So again, it's some really, hard conversations, and it's what I like to call partnership. I'm working with a client right now, and they are really struggling in terms of, they both want to be involved in the business at the same level, but their vision for the business is different going forward. Like they've grown to a certain place and they were in agreement to there, but now as the business is in that next season, they're really struggling with disparate visions. And so that really does take some very long, difficult conversations of negotiation to really find that win-win solution. Yeah. Yeah, well, again, I think first of all, what it comes down to is spending some time investing in their leadership development, right? So if they understand what they're already strong in, and they understand where they need to grow, not because you're having a review with them and saying, you're not doing this good, but more from a proactive development, right? Like, I want to invest in your development as a leader. Here are the things that we see strengths in, and you don't have to do that assessment to do it. You can probably, list out strengths. Here are opportunities for growth. So that's the first thing, is they have to understand where they are starting and what they need to grow into. That is a huge way to empower your team. I feel like especially for your managers, your shift leads, you should have development plans. Like, where do you want to go next? What are the skills you need to develop? Not just the hard skills, but the soft skills. I was talking to somebody recently in the restaurant business. A lot of people get promoted from within. And so one of the struggles is that, yesterday they were one of the servers, and now they're the shift lead. And now all those friends that they went drinking with after the close, they're now having to hold them accountable, and they don't know how to do that. And now they're good at serving, and they're good. They know their job. So that's what I mean by really investing. And when you start investing in your team and helping them and training them on not just, again, the hard skills of their job, but the soft skills, the leadership skills. So that's a really big thing. And then clarity. Here's exactly what I need you to do, and here's how we're going to measure it. And you collaborate together with them. So you really involve them in the process of, what about your role do you love, and what parts don't you love? Can we shift that? Can we change that? Or how can we strengthen? Maybe you don't love it because you don't feel strong in those areas. And, okay, together, let's decide how we're going to measure it. How are we going to score? What's the scoring system? And those are the ways that you begin to empower the team. And when you do that, you're able to step back more. And the big thing about empowerment is letting people take the opportunity to grow. And they're going to fail some. You failed some. They're going to fail some, right? And one of my clients said to me the other day, she said, you know what? I realized that they're never going to do it quite as good as I do it. And I have to be okay with that. So you can choose to stay in the weeds, and you can choose to stay in the tactical space and have no boundaries or self-care, or you can step back and say, okay, it's not going to be 99% the way I would do it. It might be 95%, and that's good enough because of what I'm getting.
Piggybacking off of that, something like really a mindset shift that helped me a lot was thinking like, if I can do this 100% the best, but I only have 20% of my time to give to it, hiring someone that's 80% as good as me, who's giving 100%, is going to do better than I could.
Absolutely. Absolutely true. And that is one of the things that entrepreneurs get stuck in. The other thing about empowerment I want to say, and it's connected to this, is we let our people down a lot. And we don't let them down because we want to. We let them down because we're too busy, we're too chaotic, we have too much on our plate, and so we let them down. We don't always follow through. And we like change, so we're changing things a lot, and we're tinkering and tweaking and all those kinds of things. So empowerment is also about stability, about clarity, and it's about consistency from our end. We didn't talk about meetings, but meetings are so important. That's a huge skill for the executive mindset, is to identify what are the regular meetings you need to have, with who and for what reason, and then having really clear agendas on what those, so they're very productive. So you're walking away, they're walking away with what needs to be done, and everybody comes back prepared. Well, you've got to model that. You've got to lead that. So I can't tell you how often when I start working with my entrepreneurs, they're like, they cancel meetings all the time. Well, can't do that. This came up, and the air conditioner broke. And and you're modeling to your team that the urgent things are more important than the strategic things. And so that's part of that.
I don't know if I have a specific question, but as I'm growing into this, one of the biggest struggles is that guilt aspect, and more so that I think in our industry, it's like we are the face of these brands. We are the person that's there, and then struggling with that guilt of being no longer the face, and that perception that we don't care as much about it. Like, if you're in a tech business,
Nobody cares, right? Yeah. And you know what it really comes down to? It's not so much that, it's the how do we add value? And that's what a lot of my clients will struggle with. It's like, if I'm not doing that, then what am I doing? How am I adding value? How am I contributing to my business? And again, that is the shift to the executive mindset. It's amazing the contributions you can make and the needs that your people have. I have my clients very often ask their key, their managers or GMs or director of ops or whatever, to ask them, what do you really need from me? And it's usually not the things that they're giving. So there's a way to have to bring value, to feel that you're valued in the organization, that you're contributing, and as entrepreneurs, we think the way to do that is that we have to be there all the time. We have to be the face. We have to be the brand.
Talk about how getting from one part of the circle, the top part to the bottom, is so dependent on discipline and system, right? In your work, what are the stats? How many of the people that are at the top are neurodivergent, and how do you get them?
We can all grow. The thing I love about the assessment that I use is it's not a personality assessment that says this is who I am and deal with it, right? It is this is where I start, but I can grow past that, right? I can grow into the other areas. If we're going to be highly effective leaders, we need all 12 of those strengths. We didn't talk about the either side of the circle, but one side is the success, courage, boldness, directness side, and the other side is the humanity side. That's another thing that there's a big struggle with is we're very often having the empathy conversation and not the accountability conversation, right? So we need to learn how to have both of those conversations. Empathy conversations are great. I call them coaching conversations. You need to be able to have coaching conversations with, hey, what's up? What's going on? This doesn't seem to be working well, and what support do you need? What training? All that kind of stuff, right? But then you need to know, before you have a conversation, what conversation you're having. And if you've had a couple of coaching conversations, now it's time to have the accountability conversation. So again, you're never, if you're at the top end of the chart, you're never going to be fabulous. Like, you don't want to be stuck at the bottom. Like, you don't want to be the COO of your organization. Okay, I'm not saying that. But you do need to lead. You do need to be able to lean into it enough to be able to download what is important to you, and to create that clarity and that structure, and to get those measurements really tight, and to really articulate the brand, and to get it down, not into a feeling space, right? Because that's the way entrepreneurs move a lot, is it's a feeling space. They just know. They walk in a room and they just know, but they have a hard time translating what they know and articulating it in a way that it can then be useful to other people. So when I go through the coaching process, what we do is we choose particular things, because you all know how you grow, right? You grow by changing small habits. That's how you grow. All of you, when I do assessments, nobody's surprised at what the assessment says. So it's not a lack of awareness, it's a lack of intention about focusing on the 2 or 3 things that you need to grow on, or that your people need to grow in, and choosing very specific new behaviors, and that's how you change. And we know that's how change happens. All right, we've got just a couple more minutes. Anything else?
How long does the process typically take for a person to go through this change within their organization and like their mindset shift?
One of my clients, Carrie, you can't change habits quickly, right? You've been doing what you've been doing for a while. So it usually takes minimum of 6 months and about up to a year to really begin to see changes in yourself. It's just hard. It's hard to break the habits of what you've been doing and trying to do something different. It's hard for you to even just begin to articulate. It's one of the things that coaching does, and whether you choose to do it with a coach or just do it with a friend or support group that you have here, is coaching creates a space for you to think about and reflect on, what are you really doing? And what do you want to change? And how do you want to get intentional? So when I work with my clients, I work with leaders, but then we start working with their teams, and it just takes time to build trust and to begin to shift. What people end up feeling is that because we all have different personalities, there's more of instead of leveraging each other's strengths, there's more of a kind of a resistance to each other. Well, that person's always pessimistic, or that person moves too fast, or that person's too bold, or that person's too nice. And it's, that basic understanding. So yeah, it's a process, but you've been at it for a while, and you're going to be at it for a while. So it's making that shift in a way that allows you to have that sense of freedom and space and passion that you had when you started the business. So, all right, I think that is it. Thank you very much. It's good to